And a fourth and different story now from Sonia.
It's very interesting to hear all the stories from everybody else. My story is entirely different, so absolutely entirely different. I was born in a place called Magdeburg in Germany. It's outside, not far from Berlin. And the day my mother took me for a walk in the pram to the park, we were attacked by Hitler Youth, the younger generation of the German, and my mother was petrified, absolutely. She shot home. Luckily, we weren't hurt, and she was crying. I didn't know. I was only a baby. I was about 2.5 years old. And my parents then, I mean, they already knew that there's a problem in Germany. My parents then decided that they've got to leave Germany. They got permission to immigrate and to leave Germany and to go to live in Palestine. I'm sure you've all heard about Palestine. That was the land that the British government was looking after and allowed some of the Jews to come and live there. We all who went to live in Palestine became Palestinians, Jewish Palestinians, which is today so much in the news, all that problem. I grew up in a country where I had to learn to speak a different language, because by my accent you can still hear that I've got a German accent, because this is the first language you have, and if it stays with you, it stays with you forever. So I had to learn to speak Hebrew, because otherwise I couldn't go to kindergarten. And eventually I learned to speak English. So I speak all three languages in one go. So I call this story of mine my lucky day, the day we were attacked in the park. I tried, in the meantime, I came to live in Liverpool, and my grandchildren were sitting. I always tell them grandma stories. They always love to hear the stories. So eventually, my granddaughter volunteered me to their school in Leeds, and she wanted me to tell my story in Leeds. And that's why I'm so pleased that I can address you children and tell my story. My story will be there and stay on, and this was my lucky day. So as I said, I went to live in Palestine with my parents. And before I carry on, I'd like to introduce you to my grandparents. You see, these are my grandparents who were married when they got married. And I was very surprised when I came here. There was a nice photograph of them. My grandparents went to live in Magdeburg. They grew up there. They had their children there, and my mother was also born also went to live in Magdeburg, and so my mother and father married in Magdeburg, and they were the ones who decided to leave the country. My lucky day. We went in 1933-4, and my grandparents, the other side, my mother's parents, came in 1936 to Palestine. Unfortunately, my grandparents, who you see here, were not that clever. They got to Palestine, they looked at the country, which was hot, very hot, lots of sand, not built up yet, and they had a good and comfortable life in Germany, and they went back to Germany, and eventually the Nazis got them. My grandparents, you showing any more pictures, or are you just staying with these pictures? My grandparents were very, well, do you want?
Just pass me that paper. No, the black thing there. No.
On that.
Oh, sorry. Cheers, thank you, Tom.
What are we going to show you my family? Where are we? Okay. My grandparents, these two people here, stayed on in Germany. Unfortunately, they were caught by the Nazis, and my grandparents were deported to Theresienstadt. Some of you might have seen the books that I had before. They were there. My grandfather was killed in Theresienstadt, and then at the end they took my grandmother, who was a very elegant lady and didn't have anything to worry about, and they sent her to Auschwitz, and they gassed her in Auschwitz. That's my grandmother, when she was young. Yes, oh here, I've got it here. So this story is so different to everybody else's story. We all have stories. And I feel here, you see, these were my aunties or my grandmother's sisters. And that's how they used to get dressed up to go to the beach those days. See, no swimsuits. And all the younger people are eventually the ones who were older. Where's that thing? Next picture, please. You see my grandmother there, the lady with the white jabot? She was the elegant lady who ended up eventually in Auschwitz. And the story goes on. Next. These were my grandparents before they were deported, and unfortunately, these are all stories, and I am the only one now, the elder sister, daughter of all these women that you saw. There we are. These ladies that you see here are all the granddaughters of the ladies you saw in these white outfits. Yes, all these ladies live in Israel now, and we are all cousins, and we are all the lucky ones who can come see each other and talk about the family. As I'm the older one, it all goes on. So we all had the past. We all know about our grandparents, and there's sadness about it. And we all know that they all perished in Austria, in Germany. No, it was Poland, Auschwitz, and in the gas chambers. About a few years ago, living in Liverpool, I was contacted by a group of researchers from Magdeburg. I was very surprised. They somehow followed me up because I grew up in Palestine, became an Israeli. Oh yes, forgot to tell you that in 1948 in the morning, I was a Palestinian, and in the evening the United Nations agreed to the state of Israel, and I became an Israeli. So I went to school there, eventually married a Liverpudlian, and came to live in Liverpool. Life is a different way. We don't know what we do. Anyway, this research group was looking for people who have lost their relatives in the concentration camps. And there was an artist, or I don't know how they came to do it, who had this idea that we not to forget the people who died. They had no funeral, they had no headstone, they had no remembrance whatsoever. These people, 6 million Jews, not all of them were buried properly or anything. So he came up with the idea of creating what they call stumbling stones. You got a picture there of the stumbling stones. And they found, you haven't got it. Yeah. They created these plaques on metal and inscribed the name of the person who lived in the middle of town somewhere, and put these plaques down in front of the area where the people lived, in front of the houses. And they are called stumbling stone. And this is the way we can remember our grandparents and our people, our children that were killed in the Holocaust, because there's a name, a date, and the whole thing is that the Germans were so methodical that every date and every name was written down. So anybody who today, you hear it sometimes, the horrors, that it didn't exist, so it wasn't like that. It's all written down because they gave everybody a job, lists, and the lists were found with the names, the dates, and when they were killed. So anyway, we got in touch with me and some other people from my cousins, and we went, and my son, and we were all invited to come to the dedication of my grandparents in their name in the street in the city where they lived before they were killed. So I took my son came with me, and my grandson, who was 12, like about the age, and we went back to Magdeburg. I was a baby when I left, and now I came to remember my grandchildren. And there's a picture of that as well. And there was a very emotional get-together because they brought children from schools to see us survivors, and each of us had a story to tell as well. And I stood up in the middle of Magdeburg at the dedication, speaking in German. I never, ever said anything I had no opportunity. And that gave me the promise, the feeling that here I am, you tried to get rid of us, you tried to finish us all off, and here I am, you couldn't, you didn't, and we are here, and we remember all that. So now we know it's very satisfying to do this dedication as well as to show the younger generation, you can't get rid of us. And it says so in the Bible. Tell it to your children. It's written. And that's what I'm doing, telling my grandchildren, telling you children, and hopefully you go home and you tell them in school what you heard. We've got all sorts of stories. There are plenty of people with stories. And we have to remember that those people were killed for nothing. Mind you that there were 1.5 million children killed in the Holocaust. Those children never grew up, never got married, never had families, and so we remember them as well. So thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions, please do.
No doubt there are lots of questions, but realising, of course, some people have to leave now. Just to say, of course, is that the people on the table here, and I'll include Megan in this, of course, we do go into schools, and we do, and the people here do tell their stories to the children there as well. So that is available as well. And also, there's a young boy at Broad Green International School called Yaman, who is a refugee from Syria. And he too goes into schools and tells his story about how he came out of Syria and is now in the UK. So we've got short time for a few questions for Sonia. Okay? First hand I saw up. There we are.
I have to have somebody who's...
When you left Germany, did you have any siblings?
I have to have somebody who say...
When you left Germany, did you have any brothers or sisters come with you?
No. I didn't have any brothers or sisters at all. I was only about 3 or so years old. And the amazing is, I have a sister, but she was born after the war, and she was born in Israel. She was 13 years younger than me. And she knows the story.
Nice loud voice.
Did you know anything about the conversation camps?
What?
Did you know anything about the conversation camps?
About the camps, yeah. When you were in Israel, Palestine, did you know about what was happening in Germany?
Sure. We heard what happened in Germany. And as a matter of fact, at one time my father got a message through, I couldn't remember, and that was the first time I saw a Jewish man praying for the soul of his parents. That was for me as a child. I was only a child then. Was the very first time, and that he said the prayer for the dead. So when we eventually back to Germany, all those years later, and my son was there in the middle of Germany, in the middle of Magdeburg, after I spoke, and he carried on the same prayer that my father said for his parents, my son said for all the others. Thank you. Good question.
Looking around schools that haven't spoken yet. Holy Name, please. Someone from Holy Name? Yep, and whichever one.
How did you feel when you went to Palestine?
How did you feel when you went to Palestine?
I felt very well because I was very happy that the British government gave us permission, yes, to live there. We all became Palestinian on that day. There were 600,000 Jews in Palestine before the State of Israel was created. And after the creation of the State of Israel, I volunteered to every way of helping children who came without the parents and so on, no matter what religion. The children that I am involved even today are children. There are Jewish children, Christian children, Muslim children, and all sorts, because in Israel there's a mixture of all sorts of cultures. And I belong to one of the biggest fundraising charity organization in worldwide, I would say, that was actually created in Liverpool and in Manchester many, many years ago. Everything good comes out of Liverpool. And we looked after women and children in Israel who came with nothing, just like the kids that came here to this time. And we all still do welfare work for these women and children in Israel now.
Okay, I can see two schools that we haven't gone to yet, which are Kirkdale and Broad Green. And the young lady whom I ignored about an hour ago, I haven't forgotten you. So we'll have Kirkdale, Broad Green, and then the young lady at the back in that order, okay?
Oh.
And I think that will be it then.
Look at them. Just a second.
How old were you when you came to Liverpool?
How old were you when you came to Liverpool?
Oh dear, I wouldn't tell you. I was married in Liverpool. I met my husband in Israel. He was actually a soldier in the British Army, Jewish Brigade. And I met him in Israel, eventually fell in love, yeah? And I was in the 30s. And I came to Liverpool, and I was made very, very welcome here by the community and by all the work that we all do, and got married in Chilwell Synagogue. And then I had my own children who were born here, and they know all the stories, grandma's stories. That's what I do. So, thank you.
How old was you when your grandparents died?
Basically, how old were you at the end of the Second World War?
Second World War.
1945.
1945.
How old were you in 1945? There we are.
1945. I was born 1931. So work it out. I must have been 12, don't I? I can't really work it out now.
Do you still keep in touch with your family now?
Pardon? Did I?
You still keep in touch with all your relatives and people in the picture?
We are in relatives. I don't know who you've seen there. All those.
The same as on that screen there.
All those, yes. Of course, I'm keeping in touch. These are my cousins. They live there. They all have families. They all know the connection that we have. And we all keep in touch. We talk on the phone. Not everybody is a computer savvy. And we do all that. It's very important for all of us to tell our stories, because each parent of these young ladies that you see there was also a survivor from the Holocaust. We're very fortunate that we can stand up and talk about it and tell the stories. Because if we would have forgotten to tell our stories, so the Germans have managed to get rid of us. And this way we remember the people that were lost in the Holocaust.
Right, can we all just give a big round of applause for Sonia?